Hi, it's Miss Vital. This podcast is on Chapter 3, which is about the biosphere. Ecology is the study of the interactions of organisms with their environment. These two interactions are two-way. Organisms are affected by their environment, but their presence and activity can change their environment. The levels of organization in an ecosystem begin with an organism. An organism is an individual living thing. A species is a group of organisms that interbreed and produce healthy, fertile offspring. A population are all of the members of one species in an area. A community are all the populations of different species in an area. An ecosystem are all the living and non-living things in an area. A biome is a terrestrial ecosystem. It is based on climate and organisms that live there, usually plants and animals. The biosphere is the global ecosystem. Ecosystems have biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic means life forms. These are the organisms and the living things in an ecosystem. Abiotic are all the non-living factors, things like temperature, water, sunlight, and objects such as rocks and buildings. Where does all of the Earth's energy come from? The sun. All life on Earth is dependent on energy from the sun. It begins with autotrophs, which are also called producers. These are organisms that make their own food. They are photosynthetic, and things like plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria are autotrophs. Heterotrophs are called consumers. They are organisms that can't make their own food. They must consume other organisms. Animals, fungi, most bacteria, and protists are the different types of heterotrophs. We break down heterotrophs into individual categories, beginning with herbivores. Herbivores are plant eaters. Carnivores eat meat or eat other animals. Omnivores eat plants and animals. Things like humans, crows, cockroaches, and raccoons are examples of omnivores. Scavengers, like this vulture, are animals that consume dead animals. Detritovores eat decaying plant and animal matter. Earthworms are an example. Decomposers break down organic materials into non-organic materials. They produce detritus, which is non-living matter. So how are all of these different organisms connected? A food chain is a sequence of food transfers from producers through several levels of consumers in an ecosystem. A trophic level is each step in a food chain or a food web. A food web is a network of interconnecting food chains. Ecological pyramids show the amount of energy at each trophic level in an ecosystem. One type of ecological pyramid is a pyramid of biomass and numbers. Biomass is the amount or mass of organic material in an ecosystem. The pyramid of biomass shows the amount of living tissue available at each trophic level. Another ecological pyramid is the energy pyramid. This shows how much energy is transferred to the next trophic level. It's typically 10%. The only input into the biosphere is sunlight, so all the other materials are recycled. We're going to talk now about biogeochemical cycles. This is the recycling of elements in the biosphere. The first biogeochemical cycle is the water cycle, also called the hydrological cycle. It basically has 4 different processes. Precipitation is when water in the atmosphere falls to the Earth's surface in the form of rain, sleet, or snow. Evaporation is when liquid water on the Earth's surface turns to water vapor in the atmosphere. And then condensation is when that water vapor in the atmosphere condenses into water droplets that turn into clouds. And transpiration is when water evaporates from the leaves of plants. A second type of biogeochemical cycle is the carbon cycle. CO2 from the atmosphere is used by plants and algae, which are photosynthetic, and they use the CO2 from the atmosphere to make organic compounds in the process of photosynthesis. Plants and algae are consumed by consumers, and the consumers produce CO2. For example, you breathe out carbon dioxide. Decomposing organisms return carbon compounds to the ecosystem. Also, the burning of fossil fuel adds CO2, carbon dioxide, to the atmosphere. The next biogeochemical cycle is the nitrogen cycle. Almost 80% of the air you breathe is nitrogen gas. Plants can only use nitrogen in the form of nitrates, which is NO3-, or ammonium, which is NH4+. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil and in the roots of plants convert nitrogen gas into nitrates and ammonium. The plants then use the nitrates and ammonium to make proteins. Consumers eat the plants, and the proteins are transferred to the consumers. Decomposing organisms are converted back to NH4, or ammonium, and denitrifiers are bacteria that convert nitrate into nitrogen gas. And finally, the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is found in rocks. Wind and rain weather rocks, and as they break down, they add phosphates to the soil, which plants can then use to make organic compounds. Consumers eat the plants, and the phosphate in those organic compounds are transferred to the consumers. Consumers excrete or urinate out phosphates, and decomposition of dead organisms return the phosphorus to the soil. Then the soil forms rocks and the process starts again.